In the second half of the 19th century, buried deep in the district archives of western Pennsylvania, appears a strange and overlooked entry. It's listed under the cold administrative label, Interim Placement. Children. No return. The sender? An institution bearing an unusual title. Temporary resting place for minors. 6. The address? Unknown. Recipient? Left blank. There were no names on the list, no age, no gender, no origins, only a series of anonymous transfers, 37 in total, recorded between 1872 and 1878. And then, silence. The institution vanished. Not closed. Erased. No trace of its funding, no trace in legal registries or state budgets, as though it had never existed at all. For decades, local historians treated it as a clerical mistake, a misfiled record, a bureaucratic ghost. Until in the autumn of 1986, a retired surveyor named Alan Wyndham stumbled across something unexpected while studying topographic maps near Hopkins Hollow, a now-forgotten settlement surrounded by dense Pennsylvania forest. What he found was the crumbling foundation of a stone structure with no signage, no markings, nothing official, just rubble and moss. But beneath a layer of compacted soil and roots, Wyndham unearthed a small metal plate, corroded by time and weather. Its surface was hand-pressed with 6 characters. KS6. At first, it seemed like just another abandoned outpost from the industrial era, a utility shed, maybe a coal drop. But less than a year later, something arrived anonymously at the local historical museum. No sender, no note, just a plain wooden box with a single line typed on yellowed card. Found near the old stone base. Please archive. Inside the box were 3 items. A faded leather glove, sized for a woman, a child's silver spoon with ornate etching, and a bundle of aged paper, stitched crudely together with copper wire. The pages were brittle, molded, smelled of ash, and on the first page, written in shaky, urgent pencil, "My name is Zania. I'm 9. They locked me up so I wouldn't see, but I still see. No one named Zania appears in any known census or church registry from Pennsylvania during that time. No missing persons, no family records. And yet, the journal, if that's what it was, contained hundreds of entries, written in a style that no handwriting expert could confidently date. The script was erratic, sometimes childish, sometimes disturbingly articulate. The pages did not describe days or events. They recorded images, symbols, the same ones, over and over. Circles, interlocking triangles, eyes with no pupils, runes that matched no known alphabet. Some pages were torn out, others were blotted with a dark substance that modern labs could not identify with certainty. Organic, possibly, but not human blood, at least not fully. But what caught the attention of later researchers, and what continues to haunt independent investigations, was a recurring sequence. 6 marks, always in the same order. Later dubbed the Zania Code, the symbols appear not only on the last page of the journal, but also scratched inside the lid of the wooden box. They weren't just part of the journal, they were part of the place. The same 6 symbols were discovered etched into the stone walls of the old foundation at Hopkins Hollow. Wyndham himself took photographs, but years later, almost by accident, those exact symbols resurfaced, carved into stone in a church ruin outside Timișoara, Romania, thousands of miles away. No historical link, no plausible cultural bridge. Same order, same lines, same 6. And the questions multiply. Who taught a child in 19th century Pennsylvania to write symbols no linguist can decipher? Why do no town records acknowledge the existence of temporary resting place number 6? Why did every child transferred there, if they were even real, carry the label no return. We don't know, but we know this. In 1875, a Bible was donated to the First Baptist Church of Armstrong County. A century later, when the book was finally opened, archivists discovered a map tucked between the pages, a folded sheet of paper, encoded with ink that fluoresces only under UV light. No names, no roads, just a forest, and 6 shapes clustered around a hill. Tonight, we begin. Not with legends, not with stories passed down through generations, but with evidence, with the record, with the map. Because this isn't folklore, this was filed, and it was meant to be forgotten. In November 1994, a family in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, sorting through the belongings of a recently deceased grandfather, a Presbyterian pastor, donated part of his personal library to the town's public archive. Among the books was a weathered 1875 edition of the King James Bible. Nothing unusual, until archivists noticed something sewn into the inside of the back cover, a hand-cut fabric pouch stitched into the binding with faded thread. Inside, a single piece of parchment, worn thin, folded 4 times over itself. A map, no title, no legend, no date. But the topography was unmistakable. Old regional names, Old River, Black Log, Evans Hollow, all within the remote district once home to the vanished facility, known only as Institution Number 6. What made the map remarkable, however, were the markings. 6 figures, triangles inscribed within circles, connected by fine, ruler-straight lines. Each shape bore a Roman numeral, from I to Tsesa. Together they formed a strange geometry, a web stretched across the forest. In the lower right corner of the map, pressed like a watermark or insignia, was something chillingly familiar. Zinnia's code, the same 6 glyphs found in the girl's journal, the same ones engraved into the stone foundation in Hopkins Hollow. But this time, they were presented not as a warning, they were a seal. Researchers dug deep. That code, those 6 marks, do not appear in any known cipher systems of the 19th century. Not in Masonic archives, not in the records of fraternal orders, not in military encryptions, not in theological manuscripts. And yet, there it was, hidden inside a Bible, tucked away, not lost, but deliberately concealed. Further analysis of the map under infrared light revealed something else, a second layer, barely perceptible, a network of microdots forming the outline of a building, or what appeared to be one. 6 rooms, linked by a single corridor. In the center, a circular chamber. Etched above it, Nullum Iterum, rough Latin translation, it will not happen again. What does that mean? What would not happen again? And who created this map? And why place it inside a holy book? Attempts to trace the map's origin led nowhere. The Presbyterian Union's archive had no record of its creation. The church in Hopkins Hollow, the closest place of worship to Institution Number 6, was abruptly disbanded in 1875, the very year the map was likely made. The reason listed in their internal correspondence: spiritual deterioration, chronic absence of ordained clergy. The town hall yielded only one surviving record from that same era, a tax entry from 1877, referencing a special assessment on 6 minor individuals not subject to inspection. No names, no residence, no medical verification, just a line in a forgotten ledger. But things didn't stop there. A decade later, a researcher from the University of Pittsburgh made a troubling discovery. One of the marked locations on the map, Point Arfour to be precise, perfectly overlapped with the site of a mysterious wildlife die-off in the winter of 1890. Dozens of deer found dead in the woods. No signs of disease, no bullet wounds, no predators. Every animal was within a 60-meter radius, all facing inward, toward a single spot in the snow, like they were drawn to something or running from something else. In 2002, archaeologists exploring the same site beneath a ring of collapsed stones found the first of 6 stone slabs. Heavy, weather-worn, and unmistakably deliberate. On it, the code, and a single carved phrase: "She has awakened." She. Who? Coincidence seems impossible. Or maybe it's not coincidence at all. Maybe this is what happens when something is meant to be buried, but refuses to stay hidden. When history isn't just forgotten, it's suppressed. And the question we must ask now isn't what happened at site number 6, but who made sure we'd never find out. Among forgotten case files in the Tioga County Archives, Pennsylvania, a lacquered oak case was discovered, locked and long unexamined. Inside, a tightly rolled scroll bearing the seal, "Internal Correspondence for Authorized Use Only." The sender, Edward Mason, Senior Overseer of the Juvenile Adaptation Service under the Bureau of Ethnic Interrelation. Date: October 1876. Mason does not appear in any official registries, government rosters, or municipal employee logs from the era. Yet his personnel file, buried in the same cabinet, contained maps, photographs, handwritten reports, and coded messages. All of them concerned a single subject: the transfer of Subject 9 from Facility Number 6 to the Tioga shelter. His notes contained details never before seen in any recovered documents. Mason described the child as non-fixable by optical plate, meaning no photographic image could be successfully captured. Every attempt resulted in a distorted blur, as if the emulsion refused to hold the light. Even a stationary tripod yielded nothing. The only surviving depiction was a charcoal sketch enclosed in the file, a childlike silhouette, absent of facial features, with disproportionately elongated hands. The route taken during the transfer was encoded in Mason's reports as the Path of 6. At each waypoint, the escort team left a sign, an unmarked cross driven into the ground and covered with lime. Based on the decoded coordinates, these 6 stops formed a near-perfect hexagon, each side measuring approximately 42 kilometers. The most disturbing entry in Mason's report describes Subject 9's behavior upon arrival. He did not speak. He did not sleep. But each morning, we found the furniture in his room had changed position, though the door remained locked from the inside. When we attempted entry, the doorknob burned our hands, as if it had been pressed by fire. Mason demanded that Subject 9 be placed into immediate isolation. He further recommended that Corridor E be sealed without delay, and all access to the lower repository suspended until further notice. Additional stipulations were listed: no mirrors, no clocks, no copper or brass instruments in the child's vicinity. Then, abruptly, the file ends. The final page is not a report. It's a clipped newspaper article, dated late 1876. Fire at Tioga shelter. 7 dead, 1 missing, Mason among the victims. No formal incident report was ever filed. No obituary. No survivor testimony. The fire was never investigated. And as for Subject 9, he vanished without a trace. But the mystery deepened in 2006 when the Philadelphia Institute for Medical History conducted a forensic analysis of Mason's dossier. Their findings defied every historical and scientific expectation. The ink contained trace metallic compounds matching those found in prehistoric African artifacts, dated over 8,000 years old. The paper itself was European, but its fiber composition included strands of unknown biological origin. The copper wire used to bind the pages bore isotopic inconsistencies not found in 19th century manufacturing. In short, the documents were authentic, but they should not exist. So where did Subject 9 go? Who or what was he? We know only this: he disappeared. But not forever. In the spring of 1883, a curious parcel was logged into the archives of the Indiana Medical Board. It arrived without return address, postmarked locally, and bore no note or sender's name. Inside, a scorched ledger, the patient registry of a private psychiatric institution known as St. Reed's Asylum, which was destroyed by fire in the autumn of that same year. Most of the pages bore signs of soot and heat damage, but the majority of entries remained legible. One stood out: patient number 74B. No full name was listed. In the name field, it simply read, identifies herself as Joanna, refuses to provide surname, possibly underage. The attending physicians described the girl as physically healthy, but exhibiting symptoms of persistent hallucinations, paranoia, and unpredictable seizures. Initially dismissed as a case of early-onset schizophrenia, her statements, collected during periods of lucidity, would later attract the attention not of doctors, but of forensic historians. Joanna claimed that since the age of 3, she had seen what she called the children without names. They appeared in mirrors, in water, and even in the shimmer of heat above pavement. They visited her at night. They stood silently at the foot of her bed, and they hummed, like the air just before a storm breaks. What disturbed investigators most was a consistent detail across her statements. Joanna described them as identical in form, but each bore a different mark on the skin, symbols resembling the lesser dialects of pre-Columbian Mesoamerican tribes. One entry in the doctor's notes reads, "Patient claims the children do not come for her randomly. She is the only one who remembers their names." This line is underlined repeatedly. The attending staff assumed it was the result of delusion. But 2 weeks after her last evaluation, a hospital orderly vanished during the night. No signs of struggle. No body was found. More unsettling, Joanna herself disappeared from a locked ward, the reinforced door unbroken, the only trace left behind a charred circle, precisely 1.7 meters in diameter, burned into the wooden floor. The internal investigation, as noted in the surviving pages, was thorough, but never concluded publicly. 3 months later, St. Reed's burned to the ground. Cause: undetermined. All staff and patients were presumed dead, except for one physician, Dr. Harold S. Broomwick. He vanished 1 week before the fire. No resignation, no travel records. All that remained was a single note, handwritten and unsigned. They are not children. They are reverberations. What's left of something ancient, and I no longer know which of us is observing the other. The case of 74B would have remained buried, a tragic anomaly, if not for what surfaced 20 years later, in New Mexico, in 1903. Not in a hospital, not in a town, but deep beneath a canyon plateau, during an excavation of a buried Anasazi ceremonial chamber. Archaeologists uncovered walls covered in charcoal etchings, emaciated humanoid figures, their skin marked with identical symbols, described in the St. Reed file. No other traces of those glyphs existed in any known Anasazi language, but one symbol was found repeatedly near the chamber's central altar. 74B. It wasn't carved like the others. It was branded, scorched into the stone. In 1891, at a confidential conference convened by the Chicago Ethnographic Institute, a peculiar map was unveiled to an exclusive group of scholars and researchers. The map's creator was Dr. August Mason, a seasoned field researcher who had dedicated more than a decade to studying vanishing indigenous tribes scattered across the Great Plains of North America. Initially titled The Zones of Silence, the map was subsequently renamed Quiet Points to better capture the enigmatic phenomena it depicted. This map identified 14 distinct regions across the continent, where local residents had long reported inexplicable temporary disappearances of sound, moments when all ambient noise ceased entirely. This wasn't merely an absence of speech or human-made sounds. It was a total nullification of every auditory signal. The rustling of the wind, the buzzing of insects, footsteps on earth, all reduced to absolute silence. These bouts of auditory blackout varied in duration, sometimes lasting mere seconds, other times stretching for hours. Witnesses consistently described experiencing acute disorientation, vivid hallucinations, and temporary lapses in memory during these episodes. What made the phenomenon all the more unsettling was the frequent proximity of these silent zones to institutions housing children, orphanages, boarding schools, or churches caring for abandoned minors. One particularly notable quiet point was situated within Laramie County, exactly where, about 20 years later, a school known as Educational Institution No. 4 would be established. But this detail was only the surface of a far more complex and disturbing enigma. Fast forward to 1902. In southern Utah, in the ruins of a deserted Mormon settlement known as Hebrew, investigators uncovered a startling find. Scratched into the wooden walls of an old home were cryptic symbols that bore an uncanny resemblance to those documented in the medical files of a patient known only as 74B at the St. Reed Psychiatric Clinic. This house had been deliberately set ablaze, officially at the behest of the local diocese, citing concerns over profane and corrupted content. Yet, before the destruction, independent researcher Professor Lawrence Farrell had managed to meticulously copy a large portion of the wall inscriptions. His detailed comparative study yielded a shocking conclusion. These symbols were not the invention of 19th-century settlers or vandals. Instead, many bore striking similarities to the complex logograms of the ancient Olmec language, an extinct civilization that flourished more than a millennium BCE. Farrell's analysis did not stop there. He cross-referenced these quiet points with historical records of missing children in the corresponding regions. What emerged was a chilling pattern. Between 1860 and 1900, all 14 zones documented a total of 32 disappearances of minors. None were ever found. There were no witnesses, no rational explanations, or leads. All these children shared commonalities. Each was an orphan under the guardianship of either government institutions or religious organizations. Their ages clustered tightly between 9 and 12 years old. Even more eerily, every child's name began with one of the first 7 letters of the Latin alphabet, through G. By the time Farrell had pieced together this unsettling puzzle, a new name had entered the fray: Hannah Lawrence, a young girl featured in a now-famous photo album, whose diary provided a crucial key to unraveling the mystery. Farrell sought to deliver his research to Yale University for further study, but tragically never made it. He died in a devastating train accident while traveling from New Mexico, and his suitcase containing irreplaceable copies of his work vanished without a trace. The only surviving remnants were a duplicate of the map and a letter Farrell had sent in advance to the library at Syracuse University. It is from these fragments that Hannah's journey was painstakingly reconstructed, shedding light on a hidden, disturbing chapter of North American history, one marked by silence, loss, and secrets buried deep beneath the surface. October 11, 1896. This is the date where all threads, all clues, and all fears converge, captured in fragments of letters, reports, and diaries uncovered over recent decades. On this day, the orphanage in Laramie, the very place where 32 children were held, vanished not just from the map, but from memory itself. Yet before that happened, one final record remained. The last page of Hannah Lawrence's diary, the girl first seen in the faded photo from the Hatcher album, does not contain a story, but rather a list. Nurse Janice did not come. Father Harvey left in the morning, but no one saw how. Ella, silent for 2 days, won't open her eyes. Miss Rose sings to herself in the basement. The director locked the doors from inside today. We hear the school breathing. The sound doesn't leave. It waits. They said there will be a count today, the last day before awakening. The final line is smeared, as if written by a hand trembling from cold or fear. Beneath it is a stain. Researchers claim it is blood, but laboratories have failed to determine its origin. The biomaterial does not match any known blood group, neither human nor animal. Between October 11 and 13, anomalies were recorded around the school. The Laramie weather station registered a sudden temperature drop of 17 degrees Celsius overnight, despite the region experiencing a warm autumn. Atmospheric pressure fell to levels comparable to a thunderstorm front, though the sky remained clear. During the same days, telegraph communication ceased. The Cheyenne station was silent for 36 hours. No telegraph operator could establish contact with Laramie. The station's signal restored itself inexplicably. That same night, locals reported a prolonged hum resembling the sound of an organ coming from the plains. Some spoke of vibrations shaking the walls of their homes. Others described a sensation of being watched. One witness, a blacksmith from the village of Rawlins, wrote to his daughter, "The earth seemed to open up, but not outward, inward. I swear I saw the light vanish into the grass." On October 12th, 2 sanitation trains departed from Laramie, carrying no passengers. The engineers claimed they were following instructions on a sealed order, a sealed command that was not to be opened until receiving a specific signal. No official documents regarding these runs remain. These trains do not appear in the railroad schedules. They exist only in the memories of those who saw them. By October 20th, the school was officially declared non-existent. This is the phrase used in the governor's report. 1 month later, the entire site was buried under earth, leaving no trace of the building. The school archives were classified under a security clearance typically reserved for strategic military installations. Access was restricted until 2090. Only crumbs remain. In 1931, at a flea market in New York, a collector found an unsigned glass photographic plate. The image depicted a plain in Wyoming, bare earth under an empty sky. But when magnified, in the fog on the horizon, 32 silhouettes appeared. All stood in a single line, all equally motionless. Their faces were barely discernible. One matched precisely the image of Hannah Lawrence from the Hatcher album. None of the silhouettes cast a shadow. The photographic plate underwent spectral analysis. It revealed a residual thermal imprint, despite the plate having been stored under conditions excluding any heat exposure. The imprint was not human. Its wavelength resembled those emitted by cosmic bodies. Such a mark could not have appeared on 19th century material. Yet it was there. Most likely, the children did not die, and perhaps they were never alive, at least not in the usual sense. All discovered artifacts, documents, and descriptions converge on one conclusion. Something was locked inside that building, not like a prison, but like a container. The orphanage was neither a school nor a place of mercy. It was a capsule, and in 1896 it opened. But the worst is yet to come. In 1944, a military reconnaissance satellite launched as part of the Earth Scan project detected a second thermal emission of the same form. But not in Wyoming, in the vicinity of southern Quebec, near the site where, in 1852, a similar orphanage for indigenous children had disappeared, the same number of wards, the same number of missing children. This was not an isolated case. This is a system, and someone or something is running it on schedule. Decades after the disappearance of the school in Laramie, strange events began occurring in places where, it seemed, that story had long been forgotten. One such case was recorded in 1959 in the village of Pine Bluffs, about 80 miles from the supposed location of the former orphanage. Official reports describe a series of anomalous psychotic episodes among the local residents. Over the course of 2 weeks, 7 individuals, unrelated to one another, were admitted to the hospital complaining of a feeling of an unfamiliar presence in their home, nighttime hallucinations, and an overwhelming sense of fear. All insisted they had seen children standing motionless in their bedrooms or outside their windows. One patient described them as no voice, no age. They just stood there, as if waiting for me to remember who they were. The attending physician made private notes, confessing that all the patients, independently of each other, mentioned the same name: Hannah. That same year, a forest ranger named Arthur Sloan discovered a group of children deep in the woods near Pine Bluffs. He claimed they were dressed in late 19th century clothing, did not speak, but one of them handed him an object, an old metal tag engraved with the number 324 When Sloan returned with backup, the children were gone. The tag was later confiscated by the military. Its analysis was never made public. In 1960, at St. Thomas School in Denver, elementary students reported strange sightings involving a mirror installed in a hallway. They claimed that in the reflection, they saw children who were not physically present in the school. The teacher, Miss Harper, later reported finding a collection of carefully arranged objects beneath the mirror one morning: a handmade doll, a pocket watch, and a diary. The diary's pages were blank except for one, which bore the inscription, "I have returned." This paper was sent to the Archdiocese archives, where it remains under restricted access to this day. The next incident occurred in 1974 at a private psychiatric clinic in Montana. There, a woman who had been considered mute since childhood suddenly awoke from a catatonic state. Her first words were, "We are still here." Remarkably, after comparison with surviving photographs, her face partially matched one of the girls pictured in the Hatcher album. Despite the 80-year gap, medical examination showed her biological age to be no more than 40. Researchers hypothesize that some of the children from Laramie never truly disappeared, at least not permanently. Their presence can be traced through symbols, coincidences, and mentions. All these cases share a common thread. The appearance of these children is never accompanied by aggression, only silence, stillness, and a sensation of time slipping away among witnesses. The most unsettling part of these stories is not that the children have returned. It is that every time they appear, it feels like a reminder, as if they are watching, testing, judging, waiting for the next stage. They do not seek help. They do not demand vengeance. They are waiting for something. If we strip away the mysticism and emotional overtones, one important trace remains: repetition. All the cases described, from the 1890s through the 1970s, did not occur randomly or in isolation. Each fits into a pattern that was first mapped out by paranormal researcher Marcus Goff in 1982. He correlated the coordinates of every recorded incident, including those overlooked by the press, and discovered something remarkable: a triangular grid centered around Laramie County. This triangle encompasses parts of Wyoming, Colorado, and Nebraska. At its vertices lie old geological fault zones, now dormant but once active. When examining archival data on the area's magnetic field, researchers noted recurring anomalies occurring approximately every 27 years. These included spikes in electromagnetic radiation and subtle fluctuations in the Earth's crust that were not accompanied by earthquakes. It was as if something beneath the surface was awakening regularly, but never fully emerging. When the researchers overlaid this triangular grid onto a map from the 1800s, dating back to before the orphanage was built, before the railroad, and before the forced relocations of indigenous peoples, they made a startling discovery. At the very center of the triangle was a ritual sanctuary of the Cheyenne people, known as the Land of the Living Portals. According to ethnographic records, this was a sacred place where priests could see those who do not age. For a long time, historians regarded this as metaphorical language, yet these same words appear in the oral traditions of three other tribes, the Arapaho, Lakota, and Crow. All mention ageless children who appeared at the crossings between eras. In these legends, the children never spoke. They were messengers, signs, and sometimes punishment. By a strange coincidence, the dates associated with these children's appearances correspond precisely with the peaks of anomalies on Gough's energy map. Everything aligns: location, timing, and phenomena. Adding to this, there is one final observation. In 1991, NASA satellite imagery detected an underground structure approximately 300 meters beneath the former orphanage site. The government issued no official statement. However, an independent laboratory at Berkeley analyzed soil samples from the area and found traces of charred human bone fragments dating back more than 200 years. Not from the 20th century, not from the 19th, from the 18th century and earlier. This raises a profound question. Could it be that the orphanage was not built by accident? That the children brought there were not random victims, but part of a far older, deliberate ritual? And that those who established the orphanage were fully aware of the true nature of the place? On most surviving maps and blueprints from the late 19th century, the orphanage in Laramie County is marked plainly as Educational Facility, Type A4. However, when researchers attempted to uncover who exactly designed the building, strange anomalies emerged. The only construction contract found, signed in 1887, bears the name Arthur J. Ames, an architect from Denver. Yet in the Colorado archives, where his professional footprint should have been recorded, there is no evidence of any other building linked to that name. No license, no biography, not even a registration in any builder's guild. In essence, this man did not exist. Nonetheless, in 2022, a historian from Utah stumbled upon a private collection containing an album of architectural drawings, missing its cover. Inside were detailed plans of the Laramie Orphanage, signed by hand as A.J. Ames. But what intrigued experts most was not the signature, it was the structure of the building itself. Overlaying the floor plan with an illustration taken from the 1863 book, Demonic Signs of the Old West, reveals an almost perfect match with one of the known magical containment schemes. Such diagrams are rare in folklore. They were usually drawn by shamans or alchemists to isolate an entity that defies the laws of nature. Unlike portal-opening sigils, these were designed specifically to seal and contain. The four corners of the building align precisely with the four protective nodes of the scheme. The ward's rooms are evenly distributed along a circular perimeter, resembling sealed rings. The most peculiar feature is the center of the building, officially designated in the documents as an inner garden. Yet in no surviving photographs is this garden visible. Moreover, all interviews with former local residents concur. No one ever saw this garden. It was as if it existed only on paper. Now, for the most startling detail, affixed to the back page of the blueprint album was a faded note, penned in a different handwriting. They awakened ahead of schedule. We will not hold them. I tried my best. I hope the next iteration will succeed. Do not open until 2137. This inscription seems to confirm several hypotheses at once. First, the orphanage was intended not for education, but as a containment facility. Second, the entity or force it was designed to hold was not fully neutralized. Third, the building was merely one iteration, one of several attempts to restrain something that was meant to remain dormant for centuries. But what exactly was being held here, and who designed this sealed fortress under a false name? At this point, a threat emerges that transcends mere historical curiosity. If Arthur Ames's calculations are correct, then a new cycle of activity, including an energy surge and potential awakening, is due no later than 2037. The final question remains: will we manage to understand what we are truly facing before it returns? After months of studying, cross-referencing archives, and consulting with independent historians, esoteric scholars, and physicists, we arrive at a hypothesis that, on the surface, sounds like madness. Yet everything we have uncovered strongly supports it. The history of the orphanage in Laramie County is not a story about a forgotten charitable institution. It is the trace of an attempt to imprison something that should never have entered our world. A desperate experiment, built with fragments of lost knowledge, ancient containment schemes, perhaps adapted into late 19th century architecture. And it failed for a single reason: time cannot be controlled. Photographs of children who appear on no registry, paper made from wood of unknown origin, ink containing tantalum trace elements, a substance not discovered until a century later, an architect whose name is attached to only one building, and a building that vanished from the face of the earth with no recorded cause or explanation. Too much evidence contradicts the normal flow of time. Hatcher, whose notes became the starting point of our investigation, refers in his last drafts to paradoxical children, beings he describes as markers of a time loop, a closed temporal structure holding an entity incapable of existing in linear reality. In his own phrasing, these children were not products of nature. They were observer offspring, created at a point of rupture. Their appearance was camouflage. Their bodies, vessels meant to hold attention. Attention is the essential element. Everything in this story seems subordinate to one rule. As long as someone observes, the cycle persists. As long as records exist, as long as interest remains, the object stays contained. But the 20th century forgot this place. The album vanished. Keller's letter gathered dust, and the orphanage itself was erased from reality, as if someone intentionally severed awareness. That is why today, almost a century and a half later, awakening is possible. We ourselves have become part of the process. With this story, this investigation, we have once more directed attention to where it should not have been. We have turned on the light in the sealed room. Some researchers refer to such structures as temporal sarcophagi. Containment is achieved not through physical barriers, but through a complex system of coincidences, symbols, geometry, and human perception. But if that system fails, if attention becomes chaotic, accidental, or too intense, the sarcophagus is no longer sealed. It is open. We cannot assert that the children in the photo album were not human. We cannot prove that the Cheyenne orphanage contained an entity from another dimension, and we are equally unable to refute it. Perhaps this uncertainty is more significant than any answer. The cellar beneath the ruined Laramie building remains off-limits. Archaeologists refuse excavation. Officially, they cite unstable soil. Yet satellite data shows weak thermal emissions at that site every 17 years, even in midwinter. The next cycle is expected in January 2037,